Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Center of Excellence in Migration and Global Studies regular webinar. Today we're having a roundtable to discuss the issue of what we tagged self-forced migration and global diplomacy. What exactly do we mean by self-forced, quote unquote, migration and global diplomacy? For those of us with knowledge and a little bit history of migration, particularly as it relates to the continent and how Africans were forced either through the Indian Ocean, that is the East Coast, or through the Sahara, that is in the middle of Africa, going up North Africa, and then the Red Sea and the Mediterranean, or through the Atlantic route. We know that we can talk about forced migration in those centuries. In a post-19th century, we begin to see abolitionists, not for the interest of Africans, as most of us Afrocentric scholars will argue, but also for their own industrial and reorientation of the resources of Africa, of Mother Africa, etc. But in recent time, we begin to see what we call self-forced migration. In other words, nobody is asking you to leave, not because of banditry or terrorist attack or something, but as you just want to leave. And this is common among youth. The youth of Africa are living en masse, and they are not going through the Atlantic, of course. They are not going through the Indian Ocean, of course. They are going through what we consider to be very, very dangerous in ancient time, that is the Sahara. You can imagine someone living in Mali, Nigeria, Cote d'Ivoire, and whatever. Audio is not okay. And then going through the Sahara and going to North America and crossing the Mediterranean as well as the Red Sea, making makeshift boat and even modern boat, as we will see in this very short clip. They went in their effort to get to Europe and seek asylum, all because of what I can just summarize as better life for them as they conceptualize consciously. Better life as they believe. But again, you will see the tragedy. And you will see the evolving global diplomacy in terms of Europeans saying, well, we have to go back, or we ship them back to Libya and they end up in prison. Or we take them and then we go through all the necessary paperwork. You also see some NGOs volunteering to rescue some of these children, women, young, vulnerable that have been, psychologically impacted, either by their government, for them to engage on that self-forced migration. So today, to discuss with us, three distinguished scholars. Professor Tracy Fleming will go first. He is with the Grand Valley State University, and we sincerely appreciate his effort because, as you know, it is not the usual time. That's a lot of sacrifice to share knowledge, to impact us, and then we look forward to having him to be more engaged with us. Each of the speakers, if I may say this quickly, will have, let's say 10 minutes to just speak to us generally. And then any of us participants can also join to contribute. The next speaker will be Dr. Emina Williams. Dr. Emina is a vibrant scholar. Is one of those people that contributed to the first journal and has also presented. In fact, he has presented than many and has contributed immensely on all, our meetings since we started 2020. Kindly mute yourself, please. Mute yourself. I'm going to mute everybody and then ask our presenter to unmute. I've asked you to unmute Dr. Williams and then Professor Tracy Fleming. Where are you? Let's see. Okay. I've asked you to also, okay, you are on mute. That's good. That's good. Okay. So they'll have 10 minutes. We'll be expecting Professor Eugene Nweke of Ebonyi State University to join us. And as soon as you join, kindly either private chat me or you just keep waving. So let's quickly take a look at this video clip. I will show it for just 2 minutes because of time. It 2 or 5 minutes. And then the rest of hello. Yeah, so sorry, both Professor Fleming and William. I think we're having issues with the video. So let's just go ahead and start. Let's first of all try to conceptualize and contextualize self-fault migration. Professor Fleming, you may take it up, and then Dr. Emina next.
Thank you very much, Professor Tijani. I'd first like to thank the Center of Excellence in Migration and Global Studies at the National Open University of Nigeria for this opportunity to participate in this roundtable. Scholars are aware that migration is not a new issue. It's not a new phenomenon, contrary to popular media coverage. As a part of my most recent duties as an associate professor of area and global studies at Grand Valley State University in West Michigan in the United States of America, I teach undergraduate courses that focus on, number one, understanding Africa. Number two, introducing students to the emergence and dynamics of African American studies. Number three, US-Africa relations. And number four, facilitating independent readings on Pan-Africanism. Also relevant to this roundtable discussion, I have taught undergraduate courses at this university that focus on African-American migration, as well as on the Underground Railroad that was a central part of the international anti-slavery movement in 19th century America. In my own research, migration is an issue and theme that has been central to my publications in the Journal of West African History and in a journal titled Africology, the Journal of Pan-African Studies. Traveling ideas and ideology are key elements in my forthcoming monograph that is being published by Lexington Books as a part of an African studies series that focuses on what it refers to as Black diasporic worlds, origins and evolutions of New World slaving. With an expected release this summer, the book is titled Travel and the Pan-African Imagination. It explores the African Atlantic world as a productive theater or space where modernity, racialized dominance, and racialized resistance took form. The book stresses the importance of placing three Atlantic figures. First, the Charleston, South Carolina-based armed resistance leader, Denmark Vesey. Second, the West African immigration advocate, Edward Wilmot Blyden. And third, the Christian missionary and teacher in Liberia, as well as the United States, Alexander Crummell, within an Atlantic context and as African world community figures between the late 18th and early 20th centuries. The book also examines the religious origins of Black power ideology and modern Pan-Africanism as products of the intense dialogue within the African world community about concepts of modernity, progress, and civilization. I identify particularly how travel and social mobility led to the generation of an ever more complex and dynamic Atlantic world and of a fluid and adaptive African world community imagination for those figures who were forced to operate within and against a racially framed universe. The vexing social position and symbolic figure of the quote unquote African was central to the dilemmas facing the racialized imagination of African world community figures and the discipline of Africology. In the Oxford Handbook of Global Studies, published in 2019, the political scientist Shin Shu-Zin contributed a chapter on migration in the third part of the edited volume that is titled Global Concerns, Issues and Themes at the Core of Global Research and Teaching. She makes the significant observation at the outset of her chapter that, quote, ever since the ancestors of anatomically modern humans walked out of Africa to populate the earth, human migration has been a powerful generative force integral to the unfolding of global prehistory and history. In her insightful analysis, she presents details that are relevant to discussions of the politics of self, forced migration, and global diplomacy, ranging from issues and themes that center on first, what she refers to, and I'm quoting her here, prehistoric migration, second, climate, environment, and migration, third, involuntary migration, including involuntary migration in Western European maritime empires, involuntary migration and land empires, involuntary migration as punishment, and involuntary migration and the dissolution of empires, as well as involuntary migrants as refuge seekers. And fourth, voluntary migration. Now, in regards to my teaching and research areas, whether we are discussing African people on the African continent or outside of the African continent, students of Africology must always keep in mind that the continent of Africa is the ancestral home of more than 40 million citizens of the United States. And this is information that I'm taking from the Africologist, Professor Molefi Kete Asante's book that is titled The History of Africa, The Quest for Eternal Harmony. The continent of Africa is the ancestral home of more than 70 million Brazilians, another 50 million South Americans, 5 to 7 million people who live in Europe and the Pacific, about 40 million people in the Caribbean, and today we know over 1 billion Africans who live on the continent. These details are referenced in the second edition of the History of Africa, The Quest for Eternal Harmony by Professor Asante, published in 2015. The third edition was published in 2019. Both editions have been used in my undergraduate courses that focus on understanding Africa, where students learn about the emergence of our ancestors 300,000 years before the Common Era, as well as their migration out of the African continent, among other topics. Thus, it is critical to note, as Shin Shuzhen reminds us, that, quote, migration for permanent settlement, the global circulation of talent, and the peripatetic circuits of service sector workers constitute the newest chapter in the history of human migration that began a long, long time ago, unquote. Indeed, this kind of information is often left out of popular discussions of the politics of self, forced migration, and global diplomacy, as headlines and news stories from across the world signal to us on a daily basis. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Fleming. I believe Dr. Williams is clapping. Everyone is clapping. We really enjoyed that, and I will revert back to you to give us more info. You have spoken so eloquently well, and I love the Africology that you brought into place. And at the moment you mentioned Africology, I remember that man, that father of Africology, that gave me that first opportunity in 2005 and get me published under Routledge in his African series. That is our very dear one, Professor Molafe Asante. Okay, so, and I begin to look at the relevance of pedagogical discourse. Perhaps if the African youth in modern Africa, in contemporary Africa, if African youth are able to study some of these great minds, from Blyden to Asante to Obama to Tracy Fleming, they will begin to rethink the perception of traveling through the Sahara to Libya, to Morocco, and then getting on those makeshift boats, and they're trying to cross over, as opposed to engaging in what is called the progress of Africa. So it is so interesting, and I don't know, I doubt whether you are aware of this. If you do, pardon my my comment, that the 2021 focus of the Olusegun Obasanjo African Union Foundation is about Africa progress, and it is chaired by the Pro-Chancellor of National Open University of Nigeria, distinguished Professor Peter Okebukola. And some of what you have invoked in the last few minutes is what we're being told, you know, to focus on. We have scholars from all over Africa and outside Africa, you know, in the diaspora. So I thank you so much. You also ended by saying it is a global phenomenon. Global phenomenon, and that is why we are looking at the issue of global diplomacy that involves between European Union, African Union, individual African states, in North Africa in particular, and then the United States as well. So we thank you very much. Lastly, let me mention two things that Professor Fleming mentioned, that each one of us, don't call me and say, where can I publish without paying for it? He is the editor of
Prof, are you still there? I think we lost him.
We can't hear anything. Prof, sir, we can't hear you.
He has migrated to somewhere else.
What's going on?
He's frozen. I'm sure he will come back
I
online.
think it's network.
He will
You
come
know,
back online.
Yes.
It's network, yes.
You know, under migration, you can navigate into whatever angle. So he's frozen somewhere else. So he has migrated into a layer. So well done, Tracy Fleming. I mean, we will be expecting him.
Okay, I think he's back.
We still cannot hear him.
Yeah, Prof, unmute yourself, please.
Okay, sorry. I'm having connection issue. I was out for a while. And
You
please
migrated,
just
Prof.
continue. I'm unmuted.
Yes, sir.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah,
Yes.
we can hear you, Prof.
Okay, Dr. Williams, you can take the floor, please. Dr. Man, I'm going to make you co-host. In fact, in case I'm out again, just please take control. Dr. Felicia.
All right, sir.
Or Dr.
Noted.
Anito, both of you.
Thank you.
I'll make both of you
All right.
co-host. Go ahead, Dr. Williams.
Thank you very much, Prof. I want to thank you for this opportunity. Let me first of all thank Professor Fleming for that brief remark on the migration diplomacy and all the rest. First of all, I actually would have conceptualized my discourse in different dimensions. But first, if we agree that migration is a movement, from one place to another voluntarily, and then we should ask ourselves, what is it that constitutes self-forced migration, and what is responsible? It therefore means that quite a number of factors are responsible for forced migration. But my major concern, which I would like to throw up in this discourse, is not about the forced migration itself. It's not about the voluntary migration itself. My concern is the recent complexity with which migration has evolved. Evolved in the sense that it has become a global challenge, which Professor Fleming attests to the extent that it has become institutionalized. It has also become an issue where both the private and the public sectors have become interested. Now, everybody is concerned about migration, refugees, and all the rest. Whether you call it refugees, whether you call them migrants, the issue is not about them. For me, I am more concerned about the politicization of these state and non-state actors. State and non-state actors in the sense that organizations or NGOs are formed just to play a front role in the refugee crisis globally. And that to that extent, we find out that even nations or international bodies came up with what I call refugee regimes, and states who were predominantly independent were made to sign or become signatories to these regimes. And this became an issue, or this is what actually spurred up what I refer to as the global diplomacy. And over time, we know that states where there are crises are so difficult for even the citizens to survive. However, some of them have chosen to either move in groups or individually. Of course, we know why they move for greener pastures, just like Professor Tijani actually attests to. Yes, they are looking for better lives. But the question which I usually comes to mind is, do they really find it, irrespective of where they want to migrate to? I remember in my last presentation where I talked about integration. Do they actually get integrated into these societies with which they want to go to? However, these states, out of globalization, which were actually meant to be sovereign states, you know, because of globalization, they were supposed to be borderless. But with the coming in of global diplomacy, states were forced, even against their will, to accept migrants who predominantly they may not actually allow to come into their own borders. So this diplomacy has started even before now. Now, going back to history, where we could now say that there was this migration, what I may refer to as the Homo erectus of human being, which is the evolution of man moving from Africa to Europe. At that point, we are saying that, and so people were able to move. But with the emergence of globalization, as well as also the clash of nationalists who became states reps after the Cold War, states were beginning to say, no, we may not be able to cope with the level with which some of these migrants are, coming into our states. And therefore, we need to negotiate, we need to find out. Now, taking a clip from the video that we watched, my concern was not even about the persons or the lives that were attached or that were lost. My concern was, how come private individuals or groups of body became so interested in this refugee crisis? So I asked the question, it therefore means there are those who are also benefiting from this particular regime. Now it has become institutionalized, it has become systematic, and then it has also become a global crisis. So who are those that are benefiting and who are those that are not benefiting? How come in most cases, Africans are at the receiving end of this crisis? So what is actually going on? Now, taking back to history, now people are migrating into Europe. Are we saying that there are better lives in Europe? So why would international bodies will want to come in to negotiate that people should accept certain number of persons and conditionalize them to make them believe that, okay, you accept this number of persons, we are going to give you this and this and that. So that becomes the politicization of this particular aspect of self-forced migrations or migrants who intentionally would want to go there, integrate. Why would states want to come into negotiation to say, look, you need to accept this number of persons and then we will support you economically? Remember that most of these states who are actually doing the negotiations are seeing themselves to be so powerful to legitimize their strengths, or what I may refer to as the games theories, comes to play here, where stronger nations would want the weaker nations to listen to them, accept these people on conditions. And of course, if we go back to what happened during the war in Europe, I think that was Yugoslavia war. Of course, we know that the weaker nations, had to negotiate their way with the stronger nations, not because they are willingly wanting to negotiate, but I think the actual interest was for them to also show that even though they are part of this refugee regime, they're also on their own, they have their own rights. So the global diplomacy that has come to play, particularly in the context of refugees or migrants, has become even more complex at this particular point in time in our history. Now, if you look at the global history of migrants in the last 4 or 5 years, it has, it has gone to a very wider, unimaginable numbers. And so we begin to ask ourselves, why would NGOs risk their own life also going to the Mediterranean seas to participate in the rescue operations of these migrants? And even at that, now you take them back to Europe, you still negotiate with the European countries or nations or institutions. Who is paying for all of this? It becomes a major challenge to me. So I'm very particular about the monetary aspects of this global diplomacy. I am also very particular about even the brain drain, because some of these refugees are not just leaving the shores of Africa. Some of them are, high-placed people, individuals who are ready to give their own to the community they want to go into. And so this becomes the challenge of the modern era, which I think that self-forced migration is not just an issue that should be overlooked. It should be an issue that should be nationalized also, because these migrants are coming in from have a peaceful environment. If these nations are where people can survive, if these nations are also where people can make a living, I do not think that there will be need for self-forced migration. Look at the video we actually watched. A lady lost her child. So you can imagine the trauma that that family will go through, in the quest to have a better life. So I think that global diplomacy should be domesticated, particularly in the host or receiving states, because the more we continue to look at it, it widens the gap between the stronger nations and the weaker nations, and diplomacy, even though the states might not be interested, I think that individuals or NGOs should play a frontal role where negotiations should be back home, rather than waiting for them at the other end of the shore to pick them in, and then bring in the diplomatic moves, which to an extent we not want to settle down. So for me, it's a major challenge that is in our contemporary.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Williams. We appreciate you for that intervention. I can tell you that we will be having a roundtable 2 on this subject. There's no way we can do justice to it within an hour. And I know that most of our colleagues are busy. Most woke up, 7 hours behind us. Professor Fleming, we appreciate you. And others from the diaspora, we do appreciate you. So we've listened to Professor Fleming, we've listened to Dr. Williams. I tried as much as possible to get women, but I think I have 2 that will speak, and then we open the floor for us to make major contribution. Who is paying for this intervention, the rescue on the Mediterranean Sea? What exactly is the hidden part of the diplomacy? Those are questions that we need to interrogate deeply. And is it just, and then why? Why is Africa the center of this unfortunate event? I'm going to ask, I'm also in the age of pandemic. I'm going to ask Professor Olokwa. We are both on the Nigerian COVID-19 research consortium. It used to be called, it is now consultant. We are not making money, so don't come looking for us. Don't say because consultant. Nothing, it's a big sacrifice. And I'm looking for Professor Olukumi. I've asked you to unmute, man. And also a vibrant young scholar. She is a lecturer at Nasarawa State University, but currently on a PhD at Morgan State University. She is actually one of the first or the pioneers of the Ted Fund Morgan PhD program. So I've asked both of them to intervene from the perspective of I'll say female, without being condescending. Pardon me. We just have to hear our mothers speak. And as soon as these two speaks, the rest of us can also show input. Who would like to go first? I think someone is on mute. Okay, you can go ahead, please. Ms.
Okay.
Jennifer.
Yeah. Good morning, Prof. Good morning, everyone. It's
And by the way, I'm sorry. It's also 6 hours behind for you. We thank you for joining us and the rest of the third fund PhD scholars there.
Thank you.
Go ahead,
I'm actually barely awake, but I'm just gonna throw in a few comments. You know, with regards to gender relations and migration, we see that this gender-specific impact that migration has on women, both from receiving countries and from hosting countries. That's to say, women traveling out of their country and women receiving guests or migrants from another country. It works both ways. There are definitely vulnerabilities to consider when migration is to be considered or is to be put up for discussion. Women remaining behind while their husbands or their parents or their brothers have to migrate or find themselves co-residing with other male relatives, or women who have to travel out or migrate to another country and have to reside with male relatives or strangers, because they're in a new country, they do not know anybody, or they know somebody, but these are new faces, these are new people with different identities, different worldviews, different perceptions. And so there's going to be a conflict of identity, conflicts of, just relations, just being able to acclimatize in a different environment. And, that pre-migration stage would, definitely tell, a great deal of impact on gender-related factors, especially for women. And, they always say that women are, most susceptible to vulnerability. And that's no gainsaying. That's definitely a fact. I have my own experiences, and I have a couple of persons who also shared similar experiences. And the decision on how to exit a specific country, the process of leaving one's country, leaving one's nation, just in search of better, living, education, be it relocation or being displaced, whatever the factor, whatever the reason, or whatever marriage, whatever must have resulted in migration. Women in the international scenes, the United Nations should definitely consider the impact that migration has on women and gender-related issues, especially for in terms of cultural changes, biological changes, and and age factors too. Especially aside gender, age should also be considered. What age do these women at what age do they migrate? Who are they going to who are they going to? Who is receiving and who is hosting? Both for receiving countries and for hosting countries. The role that aging has to impact for migrants to sending countries, and it definitely exacerbates negative effects on women. I'm not going to be specific to some stories, but I have, when time permits, my eyes are not so clear right now. When time permits, I'd like to do a paper presentation on, gender-specific, effect on migrant sending countries or migrant receiving countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Jennifer. Ms. Jennifer, again, is a doctoral student in the English department at Morgan State University. She's one of the first recipients of Ted Fund Morgan intervention to assist Nigeria in its human capacity development. Dr. Olopa can take the stage. I've asked you to unmute, ma'am, before we go back to the two main panelists. The people that I'm calling by, let me say, Fiat, they are panelists and they will be receiving certificate of participation. We do give that also. I will showcase that you have actually done this, and that should go on your CV. So you will get your certification or certificate, excuse me. So Dr. Lopa, and then Professor Charlie, let me see, Dr. Lopa, please unmute. Professor Fude is one of our senior professors at National Open University, and she is also a professorial fellow at the center. I could see she joined us, so I've asked her to unmute also to share with us from the perspective of gender. I wouldn't want to say feminist, but gender, and then you can focus on female. We are going to round up at 11, please. Please unmute yourself, but if you don't want to speak, you can just private chat me. At this point, okay, go ahead. I can see someone trying to say something.
Hello, everybody.
Oh, okay. Dr. Olopa is in the office. She cannot speak, so we take that. Professor Yofude, let's see. Okay, let me ask Dr. I'm not sure whether you are Dr. or Professor Agbonlahon. More, I will unmute you and then you can share your thought with us. I think you have an interesting intervention that will be beneficial to all instead of reading. Let me find your name and ask you to unmute. Kindly unmute, sir. I've asked you to unmute and then you can introduce yourself. Dr. Murray Agbonlahon or Professor Murray Agbonlahon. Unmute yourself, sir. Okay, we may be having technical issues. Let's go back to the two panelists. Can you round up for us in 2 minutes each? Before I ask everyone to unmute. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Okay, Prof, go ahead, Prof. Professor Golden. Yeah.
Hi, everybody. Can you get me? Can you hear me?
We can hear you, ma'am.
Oh, that's great. That's good. I'm really impressed by the presenters so far. And one important point I got from the presentation was the subject of voluntary and involuntary migration. And I just want to add, as part of ongoing research, that children are compulsory involuntary migrants in every situation of migration. They are it's mandatory for them. They have no choice in what's in the migration of their parents, and this situation has some adverse effects on the children, both in language and learning. So these are issues I think that in our discussion of consideration of gender, the effect of migration on gender, we must also take into consideration the consequences on our grandchildren. I think By the time we are done with our research, we'll let you know too. But we just thought that we should take this into consideration. That some people do not have any choice in migration, and the consequence on these people is higher than those that have a choice in migration. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. Thank you very much. And it just brought to mind the issue of mental consequences on migration. And I'm wondering whether Professor Jane Agbu and Dr. Aneto can share with us briefly before we ask the two main panelists to intervene. I've asked Professor Jane Agbu to unmute. Dr. Aneto, you have the power to unmute yourself. You are a co-host, but I will go ahead and ask you to unmute. 2 minutes each. Who's going ahead first?
Thank you, Prof. Go ahead. Okay.
And I know so many of us are going through this presidential visitation panel. Someone just sent me a text that I'm the head of department, and in fact, they're about coming to our department now. It is okay. Dr. Ohame, do you have any intervention? Can you go ahead, ma'am?
Yes, thank you. Sincerely, I listened to Dr. Emina, and a few ideas began to come to my mind. I want to look at forced migration. I'm trying to see how I can do a paper on this, looking at internally displaced persons. I'm looking at the effect of Boko Haram on forced migration or migrants, IDPs, Nigerians who have had to leave the shores of the country for Chad, for example, or Niger and all of those places. And I want to see how we could examine power relations between the migrants and the host communities, especially from the discursive arm of it. I think it's going to throw up a lot of issues. For example, right now I'm looking at Nigeria-China relations, issues that have been thrown up by virtue of COVID-19 pandemic restrictions and all that. And we are coming up with a lot of issues of racism, discrimination, and all that. So I think this is also an angle we could look at for Nigeria, for Africa. How has insecurity, the problem of terrorism, affected, brought up issues of forced migration? And how is that creating new identities for migrants moving into these host communities? These are thoughts that are just coming to my mind, and I think I'll look at them over time. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. Go ahead, Dr. Aneto, go ahead.
I'm sorry, though where I am is not very quiet, but let me quickly say a big good morning to everyone. I really thank the speakers of today. It's been very enlightening. But quickly on child migration and mental health, I want to say the angle I'm looking at is those ones we use as house helps from Togo, from Guinea, from Ghana, all is migration. And the mental health on this group is highly marked, because if they are unfortunate to enter wrong hands, they really become something else in the society. So I look at that. I also look at children whose parents have forced to migrate to outside our West African coast, migrate abroad. Some of them are in prison till tomorrow morning. Some of these students are put in adult prison, where they learn very bad habits and really come out with very negative mental structure. So these are all the angles one can look at when it concerns children migration. And of course, they are the very important group to be looked at with all seriousness, because we know that the children are the future of tomorrow. So there are many areas to look at when it comes to children migration. And my colleague is promising me she's going to give us a very good topic here on migration. And what did you say you give us? Migration and something? We are actually in the same room, but not very quiet. So I promise you that we are going to have a nice part from her coming very soon. That's why I made her come to this meeting, to come and have a feel of what we do here. So thank you very much, sir. Very soon we'll post the topic to you. Thank you, sir. Thank you, everyone.
Unmute, sir.
Unmute yourself, sir.
Thank you.
Sorry, I'm used to. I said Dr. Neto and Dr. Hame are both senior fellow at the center. And then we thank them for the immense contribution they have done so far. I could see somebody, is this Dr. or Professor Oko from
yes, Prof.
Uniben? Bro, we've been waiting, sir. Do you want to quickly do your intervention on the subject?
Hello, Prof.
Yes. Oh, okay, sorry. I'm mistaking you for another person. But do you have a comment on the subject? We will round up at 11.
Sir?
Do you have a comment on the subject we are discussing?
Well, my comment from the finance perspective is that immigrants should be has to do with the documentation of immigrants. That's those living and also the off-takers. I could see recently that the federal government noted that the inflow from the migrants abroad, was something to reckon with. So if we have a documentation, because what I see is that some of them get to these foreign countries and change their base. They change their country of origin. And such would not actually be to the advantage of the country where they are coming from. For instance, we have so many of our brothers who are outside there, and they are doing very well. So if they change, most of them, when they change their identity, they find it difficult to kind of send their influence, as it were. So if government should find a way to document, legitimize, allow people who actually want, it shouldn't just be on forced ground. If you want to leave, government should have a track of where you are going to. And when you start doing well, they should also track the funds coming from there, because that's a good source of foreign exchange.
Thank you very much. We will take the last intervention before Professor Fleming and Dr. Williams round it up. The Dean of Deans, Professor Samaila Mande, I've asked you to unmute yourself, sir.
Professor Tijani, thank you very much, Professor Tijani.
Yes,
Professor Tracy Fleming, I want to commend you immensely for your presentation. It's an excellent dimension. My own is just referring to the comment by my brother, Dr. One, the challenges we have in that aspect is because of what we have in our own country, that Nigeria is mostly a borderless country. We have challenges in our border controls. And when you have challenges in your border control, you'll be having difficulty in having the correct statistics, the correct records of people who are to go, or rightly or wrongly. And so the most important, as part of the measures for this, what we should be doing, is that we must be stressing on the need to have border control in our nation, so that you'll be able to know the number of professionals on various levels and on various angles, and by so doing, you now have a proper record of what needs to be there. Apart from the physical record, then you now have the record electronically. We've been told about the national identity card that has been on, but there are so many people, illegal aliens, that are probably having our own national ID card. And this is as a result of the challenge that we have as we live in a country that is highly borderless. Unless and until there is a measure for a very proactive approach to have border control. Within the northern part of the country, northwest, north central, our borders is so porous. And so you have a lot of illegal aliens come, and that is what is creating more tension in the security challenges we're having in our nation. And so I want to believe that that could also be another presentation, borders control, as a way of mitigating and improving the migration management in our country. So because border is a challenge, and so we have to look at how to get some of this taken care of. Once again, I want to commend Professor Fleming for this excellent presentation, and all the members that have also been part of the discussion for this engagement. And then may God bless us as we move on. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Professor Fleming, you have 1 minute. Round up. And then Dr. William, 1 minute, and then we call it a day. Bear in mind, we have 2 proposals, roundtable. Part 2 of this, and then volunteers should please chat with me, and then the borderless and boundary issue, which I believe also could be merged with Dr. Ohame's viewpoint. So all the fellows, let us talk and then come up with. Okay, thank you. Sir, go ahead.
Thank you very much. In light of moving forward in terms of methodologies for future studies, I would like to mention a project that I was a part of called the Task Force for Measuring Impact in Africology, or Black Studies. It first emerged in August 7th, 2017. The document can be found on the website for the journal titled Africology, the Journal of Pan-African Studies. That's www.jpanafrican.org. And in that Black Paper 101, it gives some very significant information regarding the call for an Afro factor or an Afri factor as a measure, as a means of measuring the importance that would score the total impact of a journal in Africology that was first issued by the founding senior editor, the late Idabari M. Zulu. I think is critical to bridging the gulf for a stronger and more enduring discipline that focuses or centers the experiences of African people, thought, and culture. So I just want to emphasize my own perspective on the significance of taking an African-centered or Afrocentric approach to understanding phenomena, particularly regarding migration, that the dominant extant literature frequently marginalizes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Dr. William?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think the way forward for me, it's like he has just mentioned, I am an advocate of Africanization, policies, because I think if issues bordering on Africa, is domiciled and domesticated in Africa, we'll be able to resolve our issues. The global diplomacy that should be adopted, or tools that should be adopted, should be homegrown or home-based tools, processes, as well as procedures, in managing the cross-border population mobility. So whether globalization has dampened or reduced sovereignties of states, I think states also have a major role to play in global diplomacy to regulate migration. Thank you very much, Prof.
Thank you very much. As I stated, 11 o'clock we will stop. I just want to thank each and every one of you for finding time, despite the tight schedule, to join us. Even those that are, I could see someone that I know she is really triple triple, what do I call it now? Multitasking. And she's still joining us. We appreciate, I don't want to mention the name so that I know you will feel embarrassed if I do. We really appreciate all of you. We will definitely have Professor Fleming back. I think we have a lot to benefit. And I thank you most sincerely, because I know what you are doing on the West African History Journal. And by the way, the fact that it's some West African history does not mean that it's limited to history. That is what I've been trying to preach here. Maybe they should hear from you, sir. Can you speak more about that journal and the kind of articles they can send in? Professor Fleming. And the African Journal. Because a lot of them thought, oh, it is restricted to history. But Africology is just about, it is multidisciplinary. But maybe if they hear from you, they will believe the lesser prophet that is me.
It is a transdisciplinary enterprise that welcomes contributions from all fields, including STEM. Yes, including STEM. We've published even medical doctors in our journal, as long as it focuses on African people on the continent and globally. Contributions from scholars from a range of fields are certainly welcome. And it is also open access.
On this note, I will thank Professor Fleming, Dr. Williams, Dr. Felicia Ahmed, Dr. Aneto, go and get your professorship. Dean of Deans, Professor Samaila Mande, and all of us that find time to really join us. We sincerely, Professor Agbolan actually posted something that I think maybe I should just read it as I round up. I feel bad that he couldn't join us. According to him, he said, thanks, Professor Williams, on the activities and actions of international NGOs involved in migration, conflict resolution, particularly with forced migration. Yes, but these are still subject to the internal political systems of the receiving country. A case in point is the Syrian refugees that were rejected by frontline countries such as Hungary, Bulgaria, etc., yet accepted by Germany. It must not be direct monetary transfer of money politics, but I agree with you that in the long run, most of these forced migrants are highly skilled and educated, and so will be of future benefits to the receiving countries. So at the end of the day, he's saying that Africa is always at the losing end. Whether it is self-forced, it is forced, it is through H1, H2 visa. So the debate continues, and I thank you so much. I owe you virtual lunch and dinner because I spent 2 minutes into the hour. God bless each and every one of you, and thanks for participating again. We'll see you at another day.
We are waiting for virtual lunch.
Yes, ma'am, we will. You are coordinating that. Thank you very much, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you, Prof. Thank you, everyone.
Very much.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.